If you've been a longtime listener of the show, you know that the five elements are at the heart of this podcast because they're found in everything within us and around us. And my guest today certainly knows this as well. Dr. Monique Rodriguez is a board-certified and licensed acupuncture physician and founder of the Five Element Wellness Center in both Coral Springs and Weston, Florida. I invited Dr. Monique to be a guest on the podcast to talk about acupuncture, specifically Five Element Acupuncture, which is a specialized approach within the traditional Chinese medicine system. Overall, both approaches view the body holistically. However, Five Element Acupuncture looks to understand a person's core elemental constitution, be it wood, fire, earth, metal, water, and then addresses the root cause of an imbalance as opposed to just addressing symptoms. The root often being an emotional or spiritual imbalance, not just a physical one. Treatment focuses on the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit. Therefore, health is achieved by balancing these elements, not just meridians. Dr. Monique explains that a person's dominant element is what most influences their physical and emotional health. As you'll hear, two people can present with the same symptoms, but if their elemental makeup is different, treatment will also be different. Practitioners often use different methods of observation to determine which element is out of balance and tailor the treatment accordingly. Five Element Acupuncture is particularly effective for things like anxiety, depression, stress, insomnia, digestive disorders, menstrual irregularities, and chronic pain. This is a true holistic approach and makes it an excellent choice for those seeking not only physical relief, but also emotional and spiritual balance. It's an amazing way to treat mind, body, and spirit. Now imagine including your home into this treatment plan. I mean, wow. Dr. Monique gives a breakdown of each element, so listen to see if you recognize yours. I'm a dominant wood, at least at this season in life. And so yes, she also shares why our elements can shift depending where we are in life. Her philosophical approach to treatment includes not only acupuncture, but patient education, dietary and lifestyle changes, and herbal medicine. She also shares her advice for us women in our 40s and 50s, advice on things like hormones, muscle mass, and protein. I think you'll enjoy today's conversation. Here it is, Dr. Monique Rodriguez of Five Element Wellness Center. Dr. Monique, thank you for being here with me today on the Mind, Body, Home podcast. I was just mentioning to you, I've been looking forward to having an acupuncturist on the show. I've had acupuncture. I tell my clients about acupuncture and to at least give it a try. So I'm excited to have your perspective here on the podcast today. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to be here with you.
So I think a really great place to just dive in is to really just talk about what is acupuncture. And I know that's probably a really big, big
Yeah.
question, why someone would consider having acupuncture. I know that there's many reasons why acupuncture can work. I think one of the things that stood out to me in some of our preliminary conversation was chronic pain. I think that a lot of people and women in general can really relate to that. So what is acupuncture and how can it sort of help with some of these conditions?
So acupuncture has been used for over 3,000 years. So we use needles in very specific points of the body where we're just sending messages to your body and telling your body what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So it hits your nervous system sends messages to your brain, and that's really how it works. Today, we know a lot more than even 20, 30 years ago. We can actually have MRIs of your brain when you're actually having acupuncture to see what is happening. So, depending on the points that what we're doing, it might be increasing your serotonin levels. It's literally telling your body to produce more serotonin levels. It can be lowering your cortisol levels. It can be send more blood flow to an area if you're coming for an injury or chronic pain, if there's inflammation. So it does so many different things. We can also get your own body to produce more opioids instead of you having to take pain medications. Now, acupuncture is only a piece of the puzzle when it comes to Oriental medicine. It's a part of, but then it's also combined with nutrition. It's also combined with herbal medicine, with therapies, manual therapies. There's a lot of things that we do that is actually kind of similar to physical therapy. We call it physical medicine since we're not really physical therapists. But a lot of the body movement is very important as well. So sometimes it might be going to an acupuncturist and thinking that it's only going to be needles. And then you get very surprised by having homework and us asking you to change your diet or doing certain exercises throughout the day. And it's going to change depending on what the person is coming in for. We can really truly help with anything and everything. I always joke about it and I tell people if you're breathing, you need acupuncture. And why is that? Because I do talk to a lot of people and they say, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. It's like, why would I need to come in? It's such a misconception just because of the culture that we live in. We wait for something to go wrong in order to take care of ourselves. A lot of people think self care is selfish, which is really not. Taking care of your body prior to something going wrong, it's the right way to do it. So before you have the pain, before you're having the anxiety, before you're coming in and you're having the hot flashes, let's take care of the things that we can see that it's going to go out of balance prior to going out of balance. And that's just maintenance of health, truly. And there is a saying that people don't believe, but it's really true. If you don't make time for wellness, you will have to make time for illness. And it happens, it really does happen to most people. I do have things that I really love to treat. In my clinic now, we have 6 different doctors. And of course, that each one of us feels more passionate about certain thing. And I've seen, because I've been doing this for so long, that even through seasons of life, my passions have changed because life changes. So what I was passionate when I first started, it's not so much what I'm super passionate about it now. It's just that I have so much knowledge now because I've been doing it for 21 years and I've done chronic pain for so long. And then until I actually got pregnant in my 40s, with my last baby, fertility or the whole hormone thing wasn't so much into my life until I actually went through it. When chronic pain became my passion was because I was going through the chronic pain. I was having issues, and how was I going to help myself and then be able to help others? My oldest daughter actually has arthritis. She was diagnosed at 9 years old. So then my mind went to full blown research. Like, what is everything that we can do to eliminate inflammation, eliminate the chronic pain? Because according to Western medicine, you put all these people in different boxes. And when you go into the acupuncture and oriental medicine, you have 2 people coming in with the same diagnosis, and they're going to be treated very differently. And the root of the problem can come from very different places. So who can use it? Anyone, everyone. We are extremely successful when it comes to chronic pain. And I am not one of those doctors that I am against Western medicine. I think we both have very genuine fortes. If somebody's having a heart attack, if somebody needs surgery, you need to be in the emergency room. There's certain limitations to what we do. But when you are having chronic pain, when you are having just high cholesterol, when you're having high blood pressure, if you're dealing with fertility issues, weight loss issues, we can help you without putting you on medications that's going to cause all kinds of other issues. So I could keep going on and on and on.
Yeah. No, there's so much I want to go back to. I think initially when you started talking about how it hits the nervous system and then that sends the messaging to the brain. I think that's an important piece because I think a lot of people are talking about nervous system dysregulation right now, right? We're starting to be really aware of how our nervous systems work. I think so many of us learned about it maybe in like middle school, when you learn all the systems of the body and then never talked about again.
Sure.
But it is such a primal piece of who we are. And so many people have been running their lives on, really hyped up nervous systems. So I love touching on that a little bit. Um, I have had very different experiences with every session almost. And it's interesting to hear you say too, that your passions change throughout different phases of life. Totally relate. But I think that also relates to your acupuncture treatment too, because what I was just saying, how every session I was always going in for chronic pain at the time. But when you said that nervous system piece, I realized there was also an emotional piece that it really helped me with too. I have one very specific time on the table where I wasn't feeling emotional that day. I wasn't thinking about anything that was upsetting me in any way, but I had a full on emotional release on the table. I just started crying and it caught me so off guard. And then as I researched a little bit more, I read that's common, that can certainly happen. What do you have to say about that, like that emotional piece with acupuncture treatment?
So everything is related, right? So in Western medicine, we're separating everything. You go to a psychologist, you go to a psychiatrist, you go to your family doctor if there's something wrong with your bones, you go to an ortho. When it comes to Oriental medicine, everything is together. We cannot separate a person. And that's why it's called holistic. It just means a whole entire person. You cannot separate your emotions from what's going on in your brain, for what's happening with your body, for even spiritually where you're at in life. From your environment, everything affects us. A lot of times people think, or they come in all the time and they tell me, I don't feel stressed. I don't feel anxious. Or the way that their body is reacting, the symptoms that they're getting is telling me that there is something there. Now, does it have to be something that you're going through right now? Not necessarily. Our bodies have memories, and there are things that maybe you didn't actually work through it, and it's still there. And a lot of times it will take time until your body actually starts reacting. Because truly, most of us, when we are going through a lot of stress, the body knows how to react. So most people don't just fall apart when they're going through the hard times. That happens afterwards. And then people will come in and they're like, well, I'm really not going through stress, you know? And then they give me this whole slew of things that they just been through. And I'm like, wow, okay, you're not going through the stress now, but that's how your body is reacting now because you had to hold on to so much and you still had to produce and you still had to show up. And now that the stress is done and over with, okay, now your body is relaxing. And now is when you're getting all those symptoms. So the release completely normal. We have that happen with so many of our patients. And a lot of times they say the same thing. They're like, wow, I thought that I was actually in a good place. I don't know where this came from. Or in a lot of the physical symptoms we get, is actually related to emotions. And this is really where the five element come, right? Because a lot of people don't understand the difference. They think that all acupuncture is the same, which is not. We use the same points, but we use it in different ways and we diagnose in different ways. So within five element acupuncture, we really look at patterns of people and how they're showing up. And you basically have these five elements, and most people will show up mostly in one of them. And within that theory, it just says that that was the first element that came out of balance. Now, with that being said, a lot of people want to be put into this box. And we are constantly flowing. Things are constantly changing. So the picture changes. And sometimes we might be stuck where you're showing up as a very much an element. Now, we all have that element that what I call it, it's we feel home. It's comfortable to us. Um, there are some people that feel really uncomfortable within their own element. So then they use what we call it the mask. There's a lot of people that, and we meet those people all the time if you really pay attention. They're the life of the party. They are outbursting in happiness. And a lot of times, those are the saddest people. They really have so many demons, and that's how they deal with. So the critical thing when you're really treating this patient, it's being able to discern what it's really their element and what they're showing to you. And that's how we actually put the plan together of how we're treating them. And it's neat because through the years, seeing all these patients, like I have a picture of what like a water person is supposed to look like, or what a fire person is supposed to look like. And I know that that's very different from other practitioners doing acupuncture. If you're doing TCM, which is the traditional Chinese, you're basically looking at people's stones, you're diagnosing very specifically. Where within Five Element, we're really looking into what's the emotion behind it, right? We pay attention to the story, but what's the emotion in which that person is telling you that story is really what is telling me where they're at. I have had people tell me horrendous stories, very sad stories that you would expect that the person is actually crying while telling you the story, but they're smiling and laughing throughout. So there's definitely a disconnect within the emotion and the story. And that is also very important to see where that patient is at in relation to the elements. So basically, the way we see patients or people is according to nature. All these elements are according to nature. And for you to be in a healthy place, everything has to be in balance. So, for example, a person that would be a wood element, if they're in balance, those people are visionaries. They're normally, you will see them in places as CEOs, they're leaders, they can change very quickly. But that is if that person is in balance. It is very common to see a wood person being angry, being very frustrated, being inflexible. Their way is the only way. Their beliefs are the only truth. They have a very hard time being flexible in any aspect of their lives. And when they're telling you the story, you can see the inflexibility. And a lot of times, people will actually show that inflexibility within their bodies. They have range of motion issues. They can't stretch. They have tightness everywhere. Their muscles are super tight. Their muscles are shortening. Their tendons are shortening to the point where things are getting ready to snap. And normally, those wood people are the people that will snap when they're completely out of balance. If I think of like a fire person, it's literally how they're fiery, they're joyous. When they're in their balance, they can connect with people. Those are the people that it's very easy to connect with. When they're out of balance, it's a complete lack of joy. And it's not sadness, it's just a blank. They're telling you a story, and it might be a super happy story. Maybe they just reached the goal that they've been working for so long, and there's just no emotion there. That is a fire person that is in complete disharmony with their element. Um, Normally, they will be the person that loves to connect with others, that like to go to parties, that like to speak to others. But that's the fire person when they're balanced. A water person, normally those people is like, when you meet them, you know them right away. Like they're deep. When they speak with you, you're like, oh my gosh, I could never speak that way. That person is just so deep. Like they're so eloquent. The way they speak, it's almost beautiful. But when they're out of their balance, they're dark. And it's just like the water, right? It's like they can be very shallow, they can be very deep. However, when you get into that deep place, it can be a very dark place. And those people, when they get to depression, normally it's very hard to get them out. It's those people that they feel like, why am I here? Not what is life about? Like they're very introspect, always looking the whys. And yet they can be extremely deep in how they see things and how they describe things and how they feel things. And then you have the complete opposite of people that you see them and they're in a complete off place. And you're like, how can that person be so shallow? That is the other aspect of water. So it's so interesting that every element, you have to be careful because you can go either way. So it's almost like your strength can be your weakness. An earth person, they love to help people. They do everything for everyone. So if they're in balance, they're going to know the difference between taking things in and letting things out. When they're completely out of balance, they put everything and everyone ahead of themselves. They love food. That's a very common thing with Earth people. A lot of Earth people have weight issues because that's how they deal with the anxiety, with just the life challenges. Oddly enough, the organs that are related to an Earth person is your stomach. It's one of the organs, which makes complete sense. Normally, they're just very sweet, genuine person. It's very easy to be around them. They're very literally sweet, sometimes even too sweet. It's sometimes you even wonder, like, is this person for real? Are they really like that? But that is an imbalance. A metal person, when they are imbalanced, they're very pristine. They're very much put together. I have been in presence of women that I'm like, oh my gosh, she thinks that she's a mess. She's not put together. Oh, I'm sorry about the way I'm dressed. But you look at them and they're always on point. They always look so perfect and so put together. In their minds, they're not. But the rest of the world sees how put together they are and how they show up. They can also be very cutthroat, just like a knife. They can tell you off, by the way. They can tell you off. Their voice will never raise like a wood person. They would be very calm. They will be calling you a sweetheart and telling you off very nicely. And you can never say, oh my gosh, how rude she was, because she wasn't rude, but she just told you off. Like knife, the metal people can be just like a knife. They can also cut people off. Once you get to that boundary with a metal person, you're done. They will cut you off. It's literally, it works like a metal. And then again, they can be beautiful if they're in their balance, but they can be dangerous. They're out of their balance. And I think it's kind of cool because you do feng shui too. So you're also working with the elements. I'm not sure. I mean, I love feng shui, but I studied very little. I don't know a lot of things. But I think one big thing between the feng shui and acupuncture that I always hear people ask me, I get people asking me all the time, do I have to believe for this to work for me? Do you think like that when you take Tylenol for a pain? No. It's going to do what it's going to do. It's science-based. When we do it, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. It's going to send those messages to your brain. It's still going to send the messages to whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. Feng Shui is the same way. When we're changing locations of things, where we're putting things in certain places, you don't have to believe the person in that house that that's really doing what it's doing. Energetically, it is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So it's not necessarily, a lot of people think it's a religion thing or a belief system thing. I don't think it's a belief system thing. You don't have to believe. It's just going to work because it is doing what it's supposed to be doing, just the same way that when you take that Tylenol, you know it's going to help with the pain.
Yes, I agree with that statement. I think it's less about belief and more about just trusting the process and just leaning into that and trusting that the person you're coming to help you is going to help you, right?
Yes.
And the needles are going to do their job. And just so it's just more of a trust thing. And I think a lot of people have a little challenge there with leaning into trust a bit. So Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you so much for breaking down the elements. I know the audience is like shaking their head and they're seeing themselves in your descriptions. Those were wonderful descriptions. They're very familiar with the five elements, and I talk about them a lot, of course, on this podcast. Um, as you were talking to, I'm shaking my head to almost every single description because I can see myself, I can see my friends or my family members. You can immediately know who is what. And I think, that's such an important part of the piece. And I think that's why I really wanted to talk to someone in Five Element Acupuncture, because I wanted to get that perspective, because understanding your element helps you understand so much more about yourself and why you do the things you do and why you're experiencing some of the, things that are going on in your body. It just helps connect dots. And I
Mhm.
think along with trust, it just brings more awareness to the bigger picture. Like you were just saying, like it just brings a bigger view into what's really going on. And then from that place, that's when you have that understanding and that awareness, that's when you can start actually making real changes to, whatever it is, your emotional wellness, your physical person, you have mental clarity. Um, yeah, it's the elements, they are so unique. Just the fact that they work in a cycle. And
Yes.
even if you see yourself in one, you are encompassed of all of them. And it's
Mhm.
just about finding your flow. And so
Yeah.
I love working with the elements. I think it's one of the greatest finds I have, found for myself and for my clients.
And
Thank you.
it's actually really cool to see when patients start changing and they don't react or tell you things or sound the same way when they first started. Um, and I mean, I even see it with myself because even when I get treated, I have had practitioners that have disagreed on my element. And I think it's because I don't necessarily have the one element. I do have those two elements that I can go back and forth. And maybe those are the two elements that I feel more comfortable with. And I can truly go back and forth. And through different seasons of my life, I can remember and say, okay, at that point in my life, I was totally being more of a fire person, or I was being more of a water person. And even the physical symptoms or the things that were going on with me were very much a water element, or it was a metal element. It's like, it's so crazy when you actually go back and you see things that happen and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, that's where I was at. And then making the connection of what's happening between mentally, spiritually, and physically. Okay, this is why I was having that pain. Now, a lot of people say, well, wait a second, just because there's something emotional going on, I'm going to have a physical symptom. Not necessarily right away, but we all have a weakness. And that looks different for all of us. Some of us have herniations. Some of us end up with cancer. And it can come from the same kind of stresses, but it's going to hit people's bodies differently. And it's always going to affect you where you have that weakness.
Yeah, I totally resonate. When I first started learning about the elements, I thought for sure I'm a water element. But I was just in that phase of life, again, talking about different phases of life. I was going through like a spiritual awakening, and I was, really honing in on my intuition, and I was going deep, right? I was for sure a water element. But as I've sort of grown from that, I recognize myself more as a wood element. Because I do, when out of balance, I get very irritated, frustrated easily, anger, frustration. Yeah. So I think that's an important point, because you might recognize yourself as a certain element now, but that too can change depending on where you're at in your life, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And you can definitely work on whatever it is that's out of balance. And that's not just coming in for the acupuncture, even through the seasons. I will talk to my patients about what they're putting in their bodies. Let's say if you are a wood person and you do have that agitation, that frustration, the worst thing you can do is actually put things in your body that's going to cause more heat. Because when you talk about anger, frustration, it comes from a heat type of thing happening in your body. It's not coming from coldness, but from warmth. And putting too much warmth in your body fuels that fire, which then causes more of the frustration. So any foods that would be too hot, meaning not hot in temperature, but causing heat, like pork, coffee, refined sugars, they actually feel that alcohol. The worst thing a wood person can possibly do is drink alcohol when they already feel frustrated, because that is just going to burst that anger right out.
I love that you mentioned that because I was feeling, and I mean, I drank alcohol occasionally. I didn't have a problem with alcohol, but I was feeling like this really deep call to stop drinking. And I didn't really understand where it was coming from, but it's like my body's natural way of saying, you don't need this anymore. You don't need it. This is not helping. Right. And since I've done that, since I've really limited alcohol, like I don't keep it in the house, I might have a drink at dinner if we go out, but that's it. And since then, I have to say, like a lot of my frustrations they don't bother me as much anymore. And don't get me wrong, this is alongside other work I've done on myself,
Right.
right? But I think that's a really interesting point to make about the alcohol, because I think a lot of people are feeling that way. A lot of people are turning to sobriety and cutting out alcohol, even if it's just for a 30-day challenge, a lot
Right.
of people are being drawn to that lifestyle now. And so I think that's a really good point to make. So I know you're very passionate about living life to the fullest. I hear you talk about that a lot, and you want the same for your patients, of course. I know the Mind Body Home community is, as we mentioned, predominantly women. They're entering that midlife or they're in midlife now. What tips or encouragement do you have for them as they enter, I mean, what I consider a really beautiful time in life, but I think for some, they don't embrace it so easily because there are so many changes happening at once.
Yeah.
And so, whether it's with their bodies or with, their lifestyle, maybe they have kids leaving the home for the first time, or they're wanting to change careers. These are some of the things that, clients come to me for. It's sort of like these life transitions almost hit around age 40. So what suggestions, what advice do you have for women that's entering that phase of life now?
So I would say don't think you're going crazy, because I do hear a lot. A lot of my patients will come in throughout that age, between 40 and 50, mid 50s. There's a big transition. You also hear a lot of people getting divorces in that age. Their kids are grown, they're going out of the house. And the truth of the matter is that hormones will do crazy, crazy things to our body. Do not think that your hormones cannot change the way you feel and the way you think. They do. It is so important to you for the women out there to understand and what you have these intense feelings. It might not be you. It might just be your hormones. And I always tell my patients, before you make a drastic change in your life, take time to really think, is this really what you want? Or is this what your hormones are telling you? Now, there's also this other side. When you get to that age, there's also some kind of freedom. Even though it's hard getting older, there's also a shift that happens in your brain. And all of a sudden, a lot of us don't care so much what other people think, don't care so much what is coming out. You pretty much know who you are. It's different when you're in your 20s and you're so concerned about how you're showing up and how others are seeing you. We get to that place where you know who you are, you know how you want to show up, and you really don't care if some people don't like you. There are people that are gonna like you. Um, so then there's that balance, right? Are you making those crazy harsh decisions because you are at that point where you really are ready to be who you are? And maybe you have not been because you were just being for everybody else until that point in your life. Or is that your hormones? With my patients, I always like to do a lot of blood work. I want to know exactly where they're at, and then we can have the discussions. I always tell them exercise. When you get to the 40s, people don't understand, especially for women. Now, across the board, male, female, you are going to start losing muscle mass. Females will lose faster. especially because we gave birth, most of us. You are going to lose muscle very fast. Protein, protein, protein. I tell all my patients, if nutrition is one of the things that I'm going to talk to them about, especially if you're over 40, I want you doing exercise. I want you doing weights because of the muscle. And then I want you to increase your protein. Most of us do not eat enough protein a day, even if you're conscious. So for a female in your 40s, you want to eat a minimum of half of your body weight in ounces. So you have to do the math from kilograms to pounds and then find out how many ounces of protein you should be taking a day. Most of us are not even getting close to it. So 40 and up, watch your protein. I know it's a time that there's a lot of changes in your life. Most of us have kids leaving, unless you're crazy like me that have kids and all over the place. I started all over in my 40s when I already have a 21-year-old at the time. But most of us are actually losing our kids, right? And then if you're married, now it's not about the kids anymore, right? So relationships change. And that's one thing that I hear a lot from my patients too in their 40s. They were always doing things together because of the kids. It was the sports, choosing schools, all the extracurricular, how we're going to get the 2 to 3 kids everywhere that they have to be at, meals, all these plans. And then all of a sudden the kids are gone. And then it's just the two of you. Do you even like each other? Do you have anything in common anymore? And that's when you see a lot of the women in their 40s and 50s questioning their lives, questioning their choices, questioning the relationships, the marriages, the jobs. It doesn't happen just to you, because that's what I hear a lot. Is it just me going through this? No, it's completely normal. And it's also a mishmash of what's happening to us physically, what's happening to us with our hormones, and then getting to that phase of life that we are more mature. We don't care so much about what other people really think. And you're more open to do what makes you fulfilled, you happy, versus what's fulfilling everyone else, especially mothers. We do have a tendency to take care of everyone before we take care of ourselves, which that's a discussion that I have all the time. And it's like, if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you pour into your kids and to your marriage? You can't, because you're empty. So you have to make sure that you're also taking care of yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to take care of everyone else.
I couldn't agree more. And you're so right. As women, we are that earth element, right? Which is all mothering. We want to ensure everybody else is taken care of way before ourselves. And you're right, at this age, I'm 42, you do find you start, it's like clients will say that I don't know who I am, or I look around my house and my house doesn't even look like me, they just don't recognize themselves, and they're in that process of kind of redefining what it means. I always say, well, not always, but recently I've said 40 is like the next phase of the rest of your life. And so it's almost like being born again. And I love that you just sort of, ease their emotion around that, you're right where you're supposed to be, and that almost all of us are feeling that in some way. And that it's okay, right? To just go with the flow and find that balance, right? Find that balance of what you enjoy doing, what you want your relationships to look like. I was just going, sort of going through this a little bit with my husband. We just celebrated 19 years of marriage.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I know I was married at 23, so it's crazy to even realize I have that many years under my belt. But we planned a trip. We actually came out your way. We went to Miami for a long weekend, and we haven't done that in forever. And my kids are still young. They're 10 and 12. But we still have some time with them. But I said to my husband, we have like 10 years tops with them
Yeah.
here. I said, what is next? And my husband's not a planner. I'm a big planner. I like to, forecast what's happening, what are we doing here? And I said to him, what are we going to do? And we kind of got into a little bit, not a heated, but just like he didn't want to talk about it. I did. It was kind of like that weird, moment. And I was like, well, you better be prepared to talk about it in Miami. I said, because I need to know, like, are we still on the same page? Because you're right. It is all about the kids and you don't find those times to connect. So lifestyle in general. And I love that. I think that that's what you do so well is you really bring, yes, you're an acupuncturist. Yes, you work in medicine, but you really do look at the whole life and
Yeah.
you see how it affects the body and you can help people through that in many different
Oh,
ways.
absolutely. And their relationships is really a big part of who they are and how it affects them. It's such a nuisance when people don't think that what's around them affects them. And then you look at just sayings, they're so old, and my kids make fun of me, when we joke about things. But I'm like, you look at nature, just look at nature and how things work. And when you put that in perspective, you will realize that there is a reason why we say what we say. It's like we always joke with our kids, don't be around bad people, right? It's just like a bad apple will get around everybody else. Put a bad apple around fruit. Like the other day, we actually did it with my 7-year-old. And I'm like, you see, this is what we try to teach you. Do you see all the other fruit that are now literally getting bad because of that just one? That is all of us.
Yeah.
It's energetic. When you are around people, they are angry, that are frustrated all the time, that are envious, that are not looking forward to spending time with you, your body can feel it. So, of course, it's going to affect you. Of course, it's going to affect your body, your emotions. So, your environment makes a huge difference. I mean, today we actually have research that shows that. You put someone that's just average working next to someone that's an overachiever, the average person is going to go up just by being close to that one person. And the same thing is going to happen if you put that average person close to that underachiever, is just going to go down. So today we know that what maybe 20 years ago people thought it was woo, it's science now. We can prove it, we can measure it. We are energy. There is a frequency to everything. So when you when you expose yourself to a certain frequency, it's going to affect you. And it can affect you in a positive way or in a negative way. So we also have to be very aware of where we put ourselves in and the environments you put yourselves in. I mean, I had just walked into a place where I was feeling great and all of a sudden I felt exhausted. I left that place feeling drained. Well, what was it around me? Who were the people around me? What was the frequencies there around me? What were the emotions around me? That all makes a difference too when people are coming in. Because I have people coming in and they have amazing jobs that you would think, oh my gosh, this person has to be the happiest person. They're hitting all their goals. And yet they come in and they're miserable. They're miserable. They're unhappy. They hate they're like, well, I love what I do, but I don't like what I do. And it's such a mash of emotions and feelings. Maybe they love what it was supposed to be, and maybe in that corporate job, it's not what they thought it was going to be. Yes, they make a lot of money. Yes, they have the title, but they're not happy. That makes a huge impact of how your body reacts. Now, imagine being unhappy in a place that you have to go every single day. And then when you get to your 40s, you start with the realization of like, okay, I'm in the third quarter here. How much more time do I have? It's like, do I still want to live this way or do I want to feel fulfilled? And that's where you see a lot of women that just quit CEO positions and high level positions. And all of a sudden they're starting their own companies, podcasts, and now they're going to travel the world and they're really going to do what they feel passionate about. So it's also really cool to see people going through those phases and then actually be able to watch the transition to what they came in as, and then what they flourish to be, like really becoming yourself.
Love it. Dr. Monique, I could talk about this all day with you. I did want to give you the opportunity. I know you have a couple seminars coming up. So let us know a little bit about those, and where can people find you if they want to come for a treatment or just learn more about acupuncture in general.
So they can come to the website. The website is www.5ewc.com. We're also on SoFlo. Down here, they're NBC, Channel 10. So we're with them on Sundays. We always do the health segments with them. So we talk about anything health. Seminars. We do a lot of weight loss seminars. The next one we have, it's going to be June 20th, and that's going to be at Motherhood Village. We also have another seminar on fertility, which is going to be July 27th. That's also going to be at Motherhood Village, which is really a cool concept. Motherhood Village, it's all about mothers. Even though it looks like when you walk in, it's about the kids and they have places for the kids to play and get entertained, but it's really all about the moms and about the women. They're out there trying to do everything, right? We're trying to be business leaders, we're trying to be good moms, we're trying to be good wives and show up at 100% in everything. And this is just a really cool place where you can meet other people doing and going through the same things that you are, and then you can exchange ideas, you can exchange what has worked, what didn't work. It's a really cool concept.
That sounds cool. I wish I was on the other coast because that sounds right up my alley. I'm all about creating community
Yes.
and because we needed support. You were talking about speaking in metaphors, and we say it takes a village, and I feel like today, in today's world, we don't necessarily have that village anymore. And we're
No.
trying to do exactly what you're saying, do it all.
Yes.
Leaving ourselves behind in the process, right? Dr. Monique, thank you. This was such a great conversation. I know it's going to resonate with the Mind Body Home community. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I love Dr. Monique and her examples of the 5 elements. I'm curious, which one did you recognize as yours? If you're in the South Florida area, you can check out the seminar she mentioned, and definitely, if you're needing support with trying to do all of the things, make sure to look into Motherhood Village. You can find out more on Dr. Monique and the 5 Elements Wellness Center by visiting their website, 5ewc.com. The link is in today's show notes for easy access. Thank you for your presence today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're new to the Mind Body Home podcast, please be sure to subscribe or follow. I have a whole summer of guest appearances coming up. A review of this podcast is always appreciated, as is sharing the episode with someone you love. Keep up with me this summer at jadescottdesign.com or on social at jadescottdesign. Until next time, so much love and gratitude.